This is the Queen of Alberni. This vessel has one of the more chaotic careers in the fleet and has a secret making her one of the more underrated vehicles in the entire province. She was first constructed in 1976 in the Vancouver shipyards as a member of the Cowichan Class. She is slightly different from her sisters with a more compact frame. This reduces her maximum capacity to 280 vehicles and 1,200 passengers, versus the 315 vehicle, 1,500 passenger capacity of her classmates. Despite the Queen of Alberni being the smallest of her class, she has one big advantage. Her overall vehicle capacity may be less, but because of how the decks are designed, her semi-truck capacity is substantial, which made her the perfect choice for the Tsawwassen Duke Point route. As we now board this classic, we can have a closer look at the ship's history, and it's absolutely insane! So I hope you're ready for this. Her first route was the Tsawwassen Bay corridor in the 1970s, but at the end of the decade in 1979, she ran aground in active pass, causing her to dramatically lean to starboard. Despite this, interesting position, there were no serious injuries or casualties to her passengers, but a racehorse was tragically killed in the incident. 5 years later, in 1984, she had her upper car deck added to her design. Shortly after this refurbishment though, the Queen of Alberni would have her second accident at Departure Bay. This happened when she suffered a hard landing, awkward name, by slamming into the terminal and damaging her lower deck doors. Things remained relatively quiet for the Queen of Alberni until 1992, when she suffered her third accident. She would collide with a Japanese cargo ship near Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal, again damaging her superstructure. As of the date of recording, this is the Queen of Alberni's final accident. In 2006, she was refurbished with updated amenities and a new engine, and still remains in its configuration today. Walking around the passenger compartments and the sun deck show how stout this vessel really is, with this walkthrough section not even being 3 minutes long. Her cafeteria and kitchen are located in the bow on the Duke Point end, and the gift shop is located at the stern. Apart from her accidents, the Queen of Alberni's next claim to fame is having one of, if not the most iconic horns along with her classmates, with them being very similar to the Canucks' gull horn. But did her horn cook for this voyage? absolutely beautiful. The route, also known as the Mid-Island Express, was first created in 1991 as an alternative to the Horseshoe Bay Departure Bay corridor for semi-trucks. The Queen of Alberni was the original vessel for the route, with the also active and desperately begging for retirement Queen of New Westminster joining in shortly after. The route's Nanaimo terminus was actually based out of Departure Bay. This was until the new Duke Point terminal opened in 1997, where the Queen of Alberni would be based for 11 years. While the Queen of Alberni was being refitted in 2006, the Queen of Esquimalt would temporarily take over. After this procedure was done and the Queen of Alberni returned, the Queen of Esquimalt would retire in 2008. The Queen of New Westminster would receive modifications and move to Victoria. With this, they would be replaced by a brand new vessel that we'll soon see later on. Replacement for the Queen of Esquimalt is much newer and debatably worse. The coastal inspiration was built in 2008 as the middle child to her class to assist the Queen of Alberni. Like her much older work colleague, she herself would crash into the Duke Point terminal in 2011, causing millions of dollars in damage to herself and the terminal. Apart from the engine issues and breaking down during Coastal Gate in 2023, she was also never planned to be a permanent replacement, as the inspiration is kinda overkill for this route. The Queen of New West's considerably smaller vehicle decks made her semi-carrying capacity pretty bad. The Queen of Alberni's sister ships were also not made to run in this particular niche either. This left BC Ferries with no choice but to keep the inspiration on the route, as she was the next best option to cloning the Queen of Alberni's heavily spec'd design. Despite her smaller stature than literally every other vessel around her, especially at Tsawwassen, no other large ferry could match the niche dominance the Queen of Alberni has achieved. These achievements make the Queen of Alberni fit in a very interesting position, almost like TransLink's now retiring Orion 5s and the Boeing 757. All of these vehicles fit perfectly in their niche, and the Queen of Alberni found hers on the Mid-Island Express. Oh look, there's Duke Point. Because the terminal was built for the semi-truck niche, transit here is basically non-existent. So we now turn around and head back to Tsawwassen. As we slowly trundle back to Tsawwassen, we need to have a look at what this route would be like post Alberni. With her retirement, the route would kind of be stuck in limbo. Actually no, let me rephrase. The route is cooked. Apart from building a more modern version of the Queen of Alberni and taking out the rest of her class and the Queen of New West, literally every other vessel, including the new ones, would be too big to make the service financially viable with 2 ships. The Salish class wouldn't be a bad option, at least from afar. They're about the same size as the Queen of Alberni visually, so why not move the Salish Raven from Schwartz Bay? That's all fine and good until you look closely at her stats. Yeah, we have some problems. Now the Salish class has the opposite problem. With their maximum capacity restricted to 138 vehicles with no upper car deck, the Salish class would be too small to make the route viable for them to run efficiently. There would need to be 2 Salish class vessels to match the Queen of Alberni's capacity alone, meaning the entire class of 4 or 5 vessels would have to be concentrated on the corridor alone, which would be a logistical nightmare. But there was a class of ferries that did have a similar capacity to the Queen of Alberni in the late 90s, and could have been a decent fit for the Mid-Island Express, emphasizing the Express here. The Pacific Cats from 1998, 1999, and 2000 could have been a pretty good match for this route. The route path for the Mid-Island Express is essentially a straight line with almost no tight corners. This, in an ideal world, would allow them to truly showcase their speed. The Pacific Cat's capacity of around 200 vehicles and 1,000 passengers would also match the Alberni's capacity, but make the slow, long, painful drag on the route go significantly faster, possibly making the route the more popular option than the Departure Bay route, and maybe even carve out its own niche of Mid-Island Express routes. Yes. A route the Pacific Cats could have thrived in, but instead, they put them on the Schwartz Bay route instead. Sounds almost as bad as putting brand new trains on tracks from the 1800s. What could possibly go wrong? With that opportunity wasted, the only option now would be to downsize operations on the Mid-Island Express with at least one of the Chinese super ferries, or even the Spirits, as they have the same capacity, or, somehow, make 2 ferry operations work for the coastals, but run at a much worse monetary loss. But only time will tell how the route performs with the Alberni's absence. After nearly 3 hours, we finally make it to Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal, parking right next to the Spirit of BC just to emphasize the size difference. I hope you enjoyed this journey and learned something from the trip, or just appreciate this unit of a ferry. For more content like this, make sure to subscribe and give this video a like, and thank you for watching.